I'm Alex White. Me and my wife is the pastor here. She's been the pastor for about 2 years. Before that, we were in Maine, and before that in Austin. We 2 years ago we had a lot out here with an old house on it, and it was pretty sad. A load of glass and trash, like some of the other lots that we've seen around town. I said soon after we got there, it'd be nice to have a garden on this. And somebody said, go do it if you want to. So we're in the second year of the garden. The idea was that basically we would put a garden together and we would use produce, give the produce to the Samaritans here in town. And this is the second year we've given them about 500 pounds of produce. It's producing pretty well. And the handouts that you saw, this is the garden. And the way to look at it really is that this is Power Street along here. The first year of the garden, we had only 4 of these raised beds, 4 by 8 raised beds. Then the second year, we added another 8 here. These aren't here yet, and this is what we're going to add. We've got a little fence in front. This fall, the plan is to put a couple of crepe myrtles in front, put some Indian hawthorn, and I've got an exotic bush called a Rangoon creeper. It's very colorful, and we're going to put that on the arch, and along the side here we're going to put 3 pear trees that flower. So the place will have some color to it. The garden's always changing, so having some green in there all the time and color makes a difference. Now, you'll see when you get out there, right about the middle, we've got a couple of trees. We've got an old Texas ash and a pecan. There were 5 trees up there before. The garden had been let go. One of the things I'll talk to you about is how important it is. You're the most important thing to the garden. You take care of the garden. The plants revert to their own state without a gardener. Maybe they'll make it, and maybe they won't. Particularly veggies, they need help every day out there. So these trees have been let go, so we had to take down 2 or 3 of them. What you see is what's left, and we're trying to coax that pecan back. Beyond, at the end of the garden, you'll see 9 fruit trees. And at least I didn't kill any this year. Last year I killed about 3 of them. And that's another thing you'll learn as gardeners. You're going to have loss. You're all in a learning mode. This is my second year as a gardener. When I retired 2 years ago, I was a hospital administrator here in Texas. I decided, since my wife continued to work, that I needed to do something and learn something. So I went up to Victoria and took the Master Gardener course up there. So I'm a learner. I lose things out here. I got 3 pumpkins this year. I'd hoped for a lot more than that. But you play for more. You take what you can get out there, and you're constantly learning and going forward. What we've done today, incidentally, I'm really happy for Michael Donalson's help. It's been a real breath of fresh air. He was enthusiastic the minute I talked to him about this, and he has done all of the work on the slideshow. He's technical where I'm not. On that thing, and we put our ideas together, and we're going to do this together. I'm going to start out with some basic plant science stuff, and then Michael's going to jump on in with the soils and the water, the culture, the environment. Then what we'll do is we'll go to the garden. We'll take another break. We'll go to the garden so you can see what it looks like. And then we'll come back, and then I'll do the final thing on fall gardening. It's a good time to be talking about gardens. The garden's at a low point now. You'll still see eggplant and okra and sweet bell peppers out there, and some herbs as well. But the rest is gone. We're ready to start anew. You'll see all the amendments out there. I've got them lined up next to the raised beds, and next week I'll put them on in, mix the bed on up, and probably, if the timing is right, maybe next Saturday we can plant, if you want to come on out. Now, if you want to use the knowledge for your own garden, that's great. It's here for you. It's an invitation to join and be part here. You're blessed with a county agent that knows what he's doing, cares about it. And I guess I would say this before I jump on in. Again, since I'm new to this, I can look at it through new eyes. The garden really is a metaphor for life. You see everything out there. There's success and failure. There's hope, there's joy, all of these kinds of things. I'll give you a couple of examples on the joy. Last spring, spring here in Texas is pretty early. I was out there and I had some celery that was growing, and a guy wandered on by. And he says, "Is that celery growing?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Can I have some?" I said, "Sure you can." And so he came and he broke it off and we started talking. He was a trucker. He was from Iowa. He had come through here and he had dropped the load in Corpus or maybe down in the valley. He was coming back and he was heading back. There was a blizzard in Iowa at that particular time. And here we were together eating celery out of the garden. He said, "This is wonderful." He was joyful. And that's the kind of stuff that can happen. What about the other side, the disappointment? I don't know what went wrong with the pumpkins and the acorn squash. It looked so good early on. The bees were all over, and the flowers were quiet. I said, "We got it. It's going to go all over." All of a sudden, the leaves turned around, and it all went south. I think it was some sort of a fungus. I think what I did was I overwatered. Watering is really critical. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I got what I got, so I guess I have to be happy with that. The other thing I would say, in addition to metaphor for life, is this is for you kids. This is an opportunity to get yourself introduced to all manner of vocations and avocations, careers and hobbies. It's all out there. In addition to botany and ag science and horticulture, you can see architecture out there. You can see ecology. You can see conservation. You can see engineering. It's all there. It's just if you put an effort in, you'll get rewarded, and you'll get rewarded a lot more than what you put in. But it will take perseverance, and there will be disappointment. But it's all growth that comes out of it. What Michael and I talked about was the idea if you got involved and grew something, maybe as a final opportunity, we could cook something too. This is a guy named Nigel Slater. Slater's an Englishman, and he's a very good cook. This is a book that he's written. He starts out by talking about what his garden looks like, and here it is over in London. He's a whole bunch of recipes. Some really good ones. How about chocolate beet cake? Who could imagine what that would be like? But Slater made it. It's good. So these are ideas, maybe award-winning kinds of things. Just orientation, washrooms, men's and women's, right around the corner, just right around here. So that's basically the orientation. Before I jump into the first part, which is plant science. Let me ask if there are any questions. We'll have time for questions at the end, but if you have some along the way, don't hesitate to come on in. Okay, how should we advance this?
Here you go. Just go that way. That goes forward.
Okay.
And you got a laser pointer if you can follow
Yeah,
that
let me
thing.
turn this.
Oh, wrong one. Just your left one.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Or right.
Okay. We want to begin with plants, and we want to ask kind of a self-fulfilling question. What's so important about plants? Why should we care? There's plenty of other stuff going on in the world. The first thing is the beginning of the food chain. There's so much talk about nutrition now, and so much more that we're going to learn. In a moment, we've got a little exercise in the handout that'll illustrate how important this really is. But this is the beginning of everything. So plant health and how plants live and work are really important. It's basic science on how to get it. It's pretty easy to understand. It can get complicated later on, but we've got the basics in here. What do they do? Shade, safety, and comfort. Can you imagine we didn't have trees to shade us? Think about all, Michael and I were talking about how many trees died in Texas in this drought. This is not good. We need to find ways to keep these plants alive, and there are ways in terms of conservation. Plants are a source of half of the medicines in the world, and how much more are we going to find out? And there's all sorts of research going on, some out of this country, quite frankly, on exotic plants and things that can be part of the medicine of the future. If you learn a basic understanding of how the plants work, you can move in the direction toward medical science and often related to that. Plants can be made into clothes. We already know about cotton, of course, but there are others as well. They clothe us. And then it's hard to say that one thing is more important than others, but it seems to me that this is the most important thing. Plants make the oxygen in the air that we breathe. And I've got a slide a little bit later on that will illustrate how important that is. Now, with this slide, this is a little game, and what it attempts to do is to show you how things are all related to plants. It starts with a hamburger. You ask the question, is a hamburger a plant? And everybody laughs at it and says, no, of course it's not. On that. But here, if you start with a hamburger bun made from flour, made from wheat, the meat from cows that feed on grass, cheese, dairy products, cows from grass, and of course these are all plants in here. Mayonnaise, grains, vegetable oil, mustard seed, ketchup. It doesn't take long to find how plants are related to a lot of things. So again, very important. Okay. This is the basic plant diagram. What it is, the question is what parts of the plant we eat. In a moment you'll see a slide that shows every part we eat. But the purpose of this slide is basically to orient you to the plant, to let you know it's got roots down here, and the roots will basically hold it in the soil and they'll take up the nutrition coming. There are nutrients in the soil. Mike will tell you about the importance of the soil. If you have good soil, you have a really great running start into making your plants work for you. They take them up into the leaves, stem, the leaves, and this, of course, is where photosynthesis goes on, where the sun mixes with the chlorophyll and creates the nutrient for the plant. So you've got the plant works together just like our body. Water nutrients up the stem. Stems support the plant, the water. Leaves use the sunlight to make food for the plant. And the flowers are pollinated by the wind and insects to produce the seeds that are stored in food. If you're in the garden, you can just absolutely see the pollinators, the bees coming around all the time. You can see the good insects like the ladybugs in there all the time. They're all over the plants. Part of the problem of using pesticides is it's indiscriminate, and you can kill good guys with bad guys. So one of the things that we'll learn is how to discriminate one from the other, not to kill the good guys. This is just a follow-up. Tops and bottoms mean that we eat all parts of plants: stems, roots, flowers, seeds, fruit, leaves, all of them. And here are examples all the way on through. We've done a handout for you, so you have all these slides on here, and you can refer back to them. So I won't spend a lot of time, but you can see how important plants really are. This is key. This is the key. This is, I want to use the word magic, but it's not. You can't use magic and science in the same, this is science. This is how it really works. And this is the key. Plants are the only living thing in the world that doesn't need defining food. It makes its own. Plants make their own, but you've got to take care of them. That's why gardens are important. Okay, they blind carbon dioxide in the air. We breathe it out. They take it in the leaves in the sunlight to produce food. This is called photosynthesis, which also produces oxygen. Now, here it is depicted. Plants produce oxygen and use carbon dioxide. We produce carbon dioxide and use oxygen. You can imagine what would happen if, for example, you burned all the trees. And people have done that in countries where they don't have very much and they need the wood, or perceive that they need the wood for heating. They burn their trees. They've killed the soil and their agricultural opportunity by doing that. We know different, but you can see how important and relational plants are to us. It's absolutely critical. Okay, what this slide does is it just helps you look at what a plant needs in order to be successful. I should have put you right up here because you're the one that's taking care of the garden. But let's start with a simple thing: a place, a container, a garden, a protected spot. Protected is very important. Plants thrive or they don't, depending on where they are. Too much sun, too much rain, too little of that. All of it can hurt and destroy or help. So they need a place that works for that. And when you look at these Bibles, these things are really kind of good. This is very grant. They'll go over each plant, and you get on Aggie horticulture and find it as well. Each plant has a certain set of needs in here, and the important thing is to find plants that grow well here, and then take care of them according to their needs. Now, you moms know what's necessary to keep your kids educated and grow them up well. You have a whole list of things. Plants the same way. These books and Aggie horticulture will tell you what they are. Light, sun, or artificial light. Veggies need 8 hours. Now, here in Texas, 8 hours is South Texas is hot. So you could actually do with a little bit of shade from time to time. But the books all say 8 hours. And certainly, if you don't have it, you don't have vegetables. Air, oxygen, carbon dioxide. Incidentally, you can crowd too many plants together. You've probably seen tomatoes where there's been too many in there. What happens is that they begin to mold inside. Wherever you have a messy garden, You have the cleanup artists, the bugs, to come on in and take care of it. And there's at least half of them that aren't so good along the way, and they'll eat a few things that they shouldn't on there. So keeping it clean and keeping the air circulating is important. Nutrients, okay, these are the big three, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But there's a bunch more. They're all in the soil. They're micronutrients, and they can be measured. A soil sample will show you what you have and suggest what you may need. Now, you're able to go some way toward improving this. The fertilizers will do that. Compost will help out an awful lot. You need to know where you are in order to get to where you need to go. You'll see when you get to the garden the bags of compost that I have stacked on there. We are adding nutrients to those boxes in there. We do it after every season to build them up. Water, critical in importance. And plants differ. And they also differ at different times. Some, for example, will say right at the start, you need to keep them really moist, and then you back off after a while. You'll learn that the thing that's most important, here's your most important tool. Stick your finger in the ground, and as you know what the plant needs, you can tell whether it's too moist or not moist enough. And then you need to water. That garden is kept alive with a water wand. You'll see it out there. That's pretty hard work. Over time, I'm hoping to put in some drip irrigation. It's better and easier to do, and the science is pretty well known. I just need to get there and haven't gotten there. The soil, the place where it all starts. Michael's the expert on soils, but it's critical. You just have bad dirt, you get bad plants. Okay, this is the end of the kind of plant science introduction. Questions?
All right, so I don't know if I'm an expert on soil and all that, but I guess I know a little bit more than Alex. So, soils can be very, very, very complicated. So, for you kids, we're going to try to keep it into a simple form because there's people that have PhDs in just soil science. It's so complicated. It's a lot of things going on, and we just want you to know the basics. So, what is a soil? Does anybody know what soil is? Anybody? Tara? Learn any? Well, what's soil? What's another word for soil that we always call it? Dirt. All right, so it's the things that are in the ground, right? That the plants grow. It's actually a building block for life, and it's more than most people think. It has a whole bunch of different materials in it, and a lot of those materials that are in it are very important to plant growth. So what does soils contain? Well, here's a little chart here that kind of shows you an idea. If you look, 50% of it is just air and water. 50%, if you took a 5-gallon bucket and put soil in there, half of it would just be air and water that's in it. Unless it's, I guess we're in a drought, so maybe it might not be as much water. But, and then 45% of it are mineral particles. What kind of minerals? Well, like Alex talked about, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, all your micronutrients are in there. Basically, those are also sand particles and things like that have been crushed up, basically quartz or things like that have been crushed very, very fine. You've also got this area, it's called organic matter, all this right here. Organic matter is anything that is or once was living. So if you look right here, you have this humus here. Well, humus is basically decaying material. So a plant leaf falls on the ground and it starts to break down into the soil. That's what makes up humus. Say, a dead worm or something like that in the soil also, it starts to decompose and breaks those nutrients down. You also have roots that make up the soil, of course, from the plants. And then you have this 10% that's organisms. What we mean by that is your living organisms are in the soil. Worms, moles, or anything like that lives in the soil. and they add a lot of good things to it. So you can see that it's not just dirt, it's made up of a lot of different things. So some different types of soil we always talk about, and these are the main ones that are really important. And I might be able, when we go out in the garden, I might be able to show you the difference. There's a way you can kind of tell your different types of soil. But usually soils are made up in combinations of clay, silt, sand, organic matter, and like I said, most of the time it's a mixture of it. So clay, of course, we all know what regular clay looks like. Straight clay, it's kind of like if you were molding clay. It's got a real packy feel to it. It's actually probably, a lot of people don't think of it this way, but the particle sizes of actual clay are the smallest. And so when water combines, that's why they all pack together really tight. Clay can be a good thing, but it can also be a very bad thing because it can cause compaction in your soil, makes it a lot harder for those roots to get down into it, makes it a lot harder for water to move through the soil, which we'll talk about in a minute. Silt's kind of a mixture of clay and sand. It's hard to explain, I'd have to show you, but it's basically, for what you need to know, it's kind of a mixture. And we all know what regular beach sand looks like, right? We have a lot of sandy soil around here. We have a mixture of both, actually, of clay and sand. But we have a lot of sand around here. Sand are a lot larger particles. If you had just straight sand, water and things like that can move through it a lot easier. But sand might not have as much of those good nutrients and things like that in it. And we talked about what organic matter was. So we want a healthy mixture, kind of probably in between. When we talk about it, when they classify soil, if you send a soil sample in, they're going to probably tell you what kind it is. And like I said, we usually break it up into clay, sand, silt, and then it's going to fall somewhere in between there, what percentage of each one of those three that you have in it. And that's how they'll classify your soil. So most important nutrients we talked about. Most people focus on nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, or what we call NPK. NPK is typically, when you look at a bag of fertilizer, it's going to say 3 numbers. Y'all ever seen that before? It says 3 numbers. Well, it's in that order, NPK. So that's your rate of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But there's also, and I didn't want to get into it and overwhelm y'all, but there's hundreds of other nutrients that are important. They're called micronutrients. They're not called micronutrients because they're less important. They're just in less amounts. These are the ones that we need the most. They're ones that we really typically have to add. Usually those micronutrients, unless you have a problem, you don't have to add them as much. So Alex talked a little bit about some compost and things like that. So how can we improve our soils? If we don't have a real good soil, what can we do? Because we want the perfect environment, especially for a garden, right? We want to have the optimal growing environment. So we can add compost. What compost is basically rotted garden waste. We might throw limbs in there, we might throw dead plants in there. Some people use it as like a garbage disposal. They'll throw their banana peels or something in there and keep mixing it around. And when it breaks down, it's got all these nutrients in it. And it's basically a homemade fertilizer is what we're using it for. So it's got all that good organic matter in there, and we can put it in there. You have to be careful sometimes what you put into a compost pile because it can, a lot of people put manure and things like that in it. That's good, but if you put too much in it, I've had the problem with somebody before, put a lot of horse manure in there, and it's real high in phosphorus and burn their garden up. So we don't want to do that. We got to make sure it's a good mix of things. We can also add mulch to the top. We see mulch a lot in our landscaping, but we can add that to our garden as well because what mulch does is it protects that soil, it keeps the moisture in, and it keeps the temperature just right. If that's the top of the soil isn't directly affected by the sunlight, it's not going to get as hot, right? So it's kind of shaded a little bit. Water, we talked about nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium being very important nutrients. But I'll tell you, this is in everything in life, including plants. And I teach this a lot when I taught in animal science. Water is the most important nutrient to any living thing. This is the key to life right here, water. It's very important. Everything, I don't think there's a living thing on earth that can live without it. We have to have it. So we want to make sure we have a good source of water. We don't want to be putting some contaminated water or anything like that. We want to make sure it's clean just like you would for an animal. I know all y'all here raise some sort of livestock, wouldn't be give bad water to your animals, right? So we don't want to give bad water to our plants. So where does water come from? Most of y'all have probably seen this before. It's the water cycle. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it's that same kind of deal where it's a balance of things.
Oh, yeah.
I think a Boogie could probably teach this.
Yeah. In fact, I probably used that picture.
Probably that same one.
Yeah.
So, but we can have too much water, right? What can too much water do? Well, like Alex talked about, if we overwater, we can have problems just with the plants. It can almost drown the plant if it's a plant that's not very tolerant to a lot of water. It can also do some things to our soil, and that can be real bad. This is some erosion going on here. And what happens is the soil gets too much water in it, and it can't hold that much water. So y'all have ever seen it flood before when it rains a lot. Well, that's causing what they call runoff, and it just runs off. It runs off the top of the soil, and it starts breaking down. This happens a lot if y'all go down to the coast a lot, down on the bays. A lot of this going on because that basically it carries that soil out as that water coming off. And so we start losing structure and we start losing soil when that water's running so fast. And so that can be a real problem. That's a lot of problem with our agricultural guys, our crop guys. They are very mindful of this a lot, and they have to protect their lands to keep this from happening. We don't want this to happen. The more they don't pay attention to it, this can start happening. So they have to really pay attention to it. Another thing about too much water is, like Alex said, is you have the potential to invite things like fungus, some bad things like that, mold, mildew onto your plants if they stay wet too long. It's just like if you left if the wall, say it flooded in here and the sheetrock wall got wet, it's going to mold. So we're going to have problems. We can have problems with that, especially down here. It's common because of the humidity, so we have to be mindful of that. I always try to get on my wife all the time. She tries to water our plants at night. She'll try to do it, later in the evening. And I tell her, you can't do that because you're putting water on there, and then at night it's not burning off. It's just sitting on there, and that's when you're going to have this fungus and things like that hard on your plants. The best time actually to water is early in the morning, so it has time to absorb and the excess burns off. So we got to keep a mindset on that water. So how does soil and water kind of interact with each other? If you look right here, I thought these were some good pictures. Soil, like I said, it's a structure. Imagine that you have the different sized particles, and water is going to move through it. So there's different ways that water can move through depending on what type of soil you have. We want it to be able to move through the soil. We want it to be able to get to different depths in the soil for the roots to pick it up. What can happen too is when we have too much, all this fills up, and this is what we get. We get flooding. Like I talked about before, and this is what we call saturated soils. And so when we get a lot of rain, soils get saturated. That's why they always say, oh, well, we got a lot of rain and we're worried if we get another 2 inches, we might be in trouble. It's because the soils can't take it anymore. They need time to soak it in and let it run out. So we have to make sure in our garden, we don't want to do this. If we're watering too much and water's standing, we could have a problem. And there's more water there than those plants can take up or they can run out. So we have to pay attention to that too. Conservation landscaping. What this is basically talking about is that, once again, that nature and balance. So everything has a balance. Alex talked about going out to the garden and seeing the pollinators. With a lot of plants, that's very important. Plants need to be pollinated. Well, how's that done? Well, it's some done by the wind and things like that, but how many of y'all are scared of bees? Probably scared of them. Yeah, I know you are. So, but they're actually a good thing. Bees are very, very good pollinators. If we didn't have bees here in Refugio County, we would be in a lot of trouble because they pollinate all of our row crops out here, things like that. Because they carry that pollen they have little hairs on their feet, and they carry them from plant to plant to plant and drop it and it pollinates. So it fertilizes those plants. Not just bees, I think you could consider flies and any other a lot of flying insects are good pollinators. So we need to make sure that we're mindful of that. We don't want to put things out to try to hurt these bees if we can. Of course, there's times you can't control that, but we're going to try to do our best to not get rid of them because they're very, very important. I think, and I don't know if there's scientific fact on it, but there was once a quote that said, if all the bees died off in the world, then we would only have 4 days to live, human race. Or maybe it was 4 months. I think that's 4 months. 4 months. We'd be dead in 4 months without bees. So they're very, very important. And a lot of people overlook that, and it's a common thing. But we got to be mindful of it. Recycling, of course, we don't want trash and things like that. But we can turn some of our trash into a good thing. Talked about our compost piles, some of our natural things we can recycle, or we can recycle them by throwing them in the compost pile, like banana peels, things like that. Anything else, if it's plastics, things like that, we can throw in the recycling bin. So reduce yard waste, pesticides and fertilizers. Pesticides and fertilizers are a good thing when used properly. I'll put it that way. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that it's all bad, because it's not. We do need them. It's very good for certain things, but we don't want that to be our first solution. There's different ways to make a decision whether you're going to put out different chemical fertilizers or chemical pesticides, things like that. You need to first decide what your problem is. Don't just go out there and say, I just want to get rid of all the bugs, all these bugs out here, and I just want to kill them all. Well, we don't want to do that because, like Alex said, we're going to kill some that are good. So we need to make sure we identify what our problem is. There are some pesticides that are labeled for specific bugs, so we need to know what we're trying to get rid of. Fertilizers, too much nitrogen and too much phosphorus and things like that in the soil can be hurtful to your plants, but if it also ends up in the water system, it can be hurtful to you if it gets into the groundwater system. So before we do, and it's also costly. So we don't want to just start throwing money away and start throwing fertilizer out there without knowing if we need it or not. If we don't need it, we don't need to be putting it out. So what we have, and this is something that actually we work with a lot with our farmers, is we have this program, and we have an agent that's all he does, integrated pest management, called IPM. We talk about it all the time. Basically, what IPM says is, if we're going to do it, we need to look at what are our options first. Is there any biological controls, mechanical controls, things like that we can do before we resort to spraying or doing something else? So some things you can do is there's different bugs, there's some biological controls. There's other insects that you can put out there that'll kill the insect that you were trying to get rid of. There's different things, like if there's weeds out there, instead of just going out there and spraying Roundup, we can probably just pull them out. So there's some different things we can look at. And like I said here at the bottom, a soil sample will help to know if you need to put fertilizer or things like that before you do. Landscape maintenance. Basically, like Alex said, we want to take care of it. You've got to take care of what you have. Here's a good example. That one's real well maintained, right? That one's probably not so well maintained. What happens is, if we say we put that garden out here and we just stop paying attention to it, there's some other ramifications of not taking care of it. Is right here there's erosion, weeds growing in there that nobody's controlling, things like that. And so if we leave it like that, probably not going to have a very good garden. So we need to take care of it. So now we're going to talk about a little bit about plant health and insects. I'm going to keep this as basic as possible. Basically, in insects, whether you know it or not, we got good insects and we have bad insects. When we think of them, we usually think they're going to destroy and they're going to be bad. all that, but there are actually some good ones. So some insects that are bad, here's a good example. Grasshoppers, they're not very good for our plants. They'll eat leaves, eat things like that. I had a program for ranchers yesterday, and we had an entomologist there, and he talked about grasshopper control. He also talked about control of what we call earworms or fall armyworms. I'm sure I've seen some of those in the grass right now. These two right here, I can tell you, will destroy any kind of plant within a matter of days. They can just destroy it. So you have to be mindful to watch them. Stink bugs are also bad. More than they just stink, they can destroy your plants and things like that. So how do we identify a bad insect? How do we know? Because I'm not an expert. I can't go out there and tell you what I'm not an entomologist, I guess. I'm not an expert. So easy way to look at them, and we have one of the sheets we gave you is called My Insects, and there's a way you can draw the insect on there. You're out in your garden, you're trying to figure out, hey, is it good or bad? Basically, if the insect has a chewing mouth part, which looks like this, or a piercing, sucking kind of mouth part that looks like this. See, that looks like a grasshopper, right? They chew on different things. Those are the kind that will destroy your plants. So that's how we know if it's a bad one. Basically, just by their mouth. So what kind of good insects are there? We talked about bees, butterflies, flies, any of those pollinators are very good. And they're not going to destroy our plants. So how do we identify them? Same thing, by their mouth parts. Either they're going to have a siphoning, which is like a tube type deal, or a sponge mouth part. Flies this is a fly here, and this is like a butterfly. Yes, ma'am. So they're not going to chew on your plant, right? By their mouth part. So they're good. We don't want to get rid of those. So that's what we're talking about identifying. Some plant diseases. Plants can get diseases just like people can, and get funguses, viruses, things like that. So how do we keep our plants healthy and prevent diseases? Well, first off, one of the big keys is to choose the right plant for where you are. There's some people that would want to try to grow apple trees and things like that down here. And some of the species will work down here, but your ruby red apple that's grown up in New York is probably not going to work down here. So, and it's probably not going to be very healthy because it's just not the right environment. So we have to know that, and we can choose that based on your guides and things like that. It's also, those guides are based on your soil type, temperature, water, things like that. The second thing is we can keep them healthy by the proper amount of water and mulch. What I mean by proper is the right amount, not too much, not too little. Plant them at the right time. If we plant them too early, it could be a problem. If we plant them too late, it could be a problem. It might not be established enough before, let's say we're talking about a fall garden right now or a winter garden. You might want to get them planted early enough for the reason of you want them to be established before they have to go through winter. And they're not going to be very healthy if you don't. Fertilize regularly, so we want to keep the right amount of nutrients for that plant. Give the plant enough space, like Alex talked about it there. They can be crowded up, and that won't be good. Just as far as their roots will get tangled up, there won't be enough nutrients and water in the soil aspect of it in that area. But also, they start growing on each other. I'll tell you all, I can always relate back to the farmers because I work with them a lot. A lot of this similar stuff. And right now, we actually have been doing some trials on spacing. Just on those crops. How far or how close can we put them together without affecting their growth or their potential to produce? And it's really interesting stuff that we're doing out there right now. And so it's real important, same thing in the garden, smaller version of it. And then you also want to keep it clean. If it's getting invaded by weeds, the weeds are going to take up all the nutrients and your plant's going to suffer. So it takes all those things to keep this plant healthy. Like Alex said, you're the one, it needs your help. So from that, hope I didn't go way over everybody's head.
It's all outlined here: site your plans, prepare the soil, planting, irrigation, weed, pest control, and fall and winter gardening. Okay, site to plan the garden. Make it easy for yourself and your plants. I started this when I had you out at the garden talking about what you saw out there. It says choose a level area with good drainage, 8 hours of sun. You can see it's pretty level and it drained toward the south. You got 8 hours of sun. Avoid areas that are low wind. Below, water gets there. Also, in the wintertime, cold goes to this area. You can have 2 or 3 degrees difference, one to the other. That's enough in a freeze to kill a plant. Windy. Wind is a real problem, and we've got it around here. You can dry the plant out. I wish I had a windbreak out there, particularly in that grove area, but I don't. Septic fields just changes the whole chemistry of the soil. Close to trees and shrubs, 2 things. Shade from the trees, also competition for nutrients and water from the soil on that. Try to keep them away. You can see the garden is pretty open, and that's what you want. Locate your water supply. You need the water, so be close to it. Okay, site plan the garden to make it easy for you and your plants. You have a copy of the model, and this stuff you can do yourself. It's not hard. You just, once you begin to think like a plant, and you know what plants need, and you understand how to take care of yourself, so you don't build something you can't tend. It's not too difficult. I guess okay. Here we go. South-facing slopes, small, 2 4x4 full raised beds, 2 to 3 paths around. You saw all of that out there, and there are purposes for all of that stuff, and it's been tested, and it's good to do. Prepare the soil. This pH is pretty important. Acidity versus alkalinity. Close to 7 is neutral. The reason it's important is plants, nutrients get picked up at different levels. If you're close to neutral, you pick up more nutrients, some a little bit more, higher and lower. There's some charts to do that as well. You don't want highly acidic or highly alkaline soil because you're very limited. Years ago, when we bought our house in Austin, I decided, since I lived in Houston, that what I really needed were azaleas in there, and I knew enough at that time that where I bought the azaleas, I asked the guy to amend the soil. What he did was he brought in some acidic soil and some other additives, and it worked for about 3 or 4 years. But then it kind of reverted back, and the plants just lost their glow, and eventually they just went away. Don't plant and do things that are against nature. You can kind of make it work if you work hard at it. It's going to be expensive. You can make some difference in the soil. You can add lime, you can add potash to your soil, but the better way to go probably is just plant the plant and deal with the pH. Compost will help to get it toward neutrality. Compost always helps. It's a magic ingredient. Fill the fertilizers and compost into the soil and get the raised beds. I went to raised beds rather than row crops out there because you can control the soil that way. With row crops, you deal with what you have and you just throw them on in. You start using the rototiller all the time, and that was the next level of complexity that I just didn't want. I also have a friend of mine here in the church he's really a craftsman. And he builds these raised beds, and he does a great job with it. Right now, he's redoing his kitchen, so we're not on his schedule for any time soon. Okay, this is the stuff. Pass it around. Michael talked about it. That's the bag, and that's the handout. You can get it from the extension office, and there is a process for collecting soil samples. And when you decide to do it, you should also get a little primer on the process. Essentially, what it is this. You want to collect the soil from various different places in the area that you want a soil sample. For example, if you want to grow a garden along the side of the house, take it from several areas along that garden. Now, even how you take it from the shovel is important. You put the shovel in, you pull it back, and you've got a little earth in there. You take earth from one side and throw it away. You take earth from the other side and throw it away. And then in the middle, you put it into a bucket. And you keep doing that process right down the line until you have soil from up and down. Mix it in together, and then pour it into that little bag. That way you've got a little of everything in there. And then the extension service can, I guess, but I've gone through it, I didn't realize that. Yeah, I did. I've gone through that, how to do that. And here's mine from the parsonage, and I guess we didn't. We didn't. Basically, what it reads over here on the major nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium over here. It shows low, medium, and high, and you can see that we're pretty good, and we're even too high here on, I guess it's phosphorus in here. So whoever had that place before fertilized it a lot. So I've just let it go for the last couple, 3 years, quite frankly. Also here, some of the micronutrients, they're not measured, but they could. And here's the pH, and it's moderately alkaline. And you're a little bit too high, I would think, alkaline. But this is where you begin when you get a hold of this. You say, okay, this is what I've got. Where do I need to go? The easiest thing to do is just add compost in the soil. Use raised beds. If you're not going to use raised bed, add compost, and then make up the difference in here with some fertilizer. If it looks like what you need is nitrogen, and you've got the other two there, maybe you want 1300 or something like that, just nitrogen on there. You don't need the other stuff. And as Michael says, it's all available. You can go over to Anderson Ag or Parker's, they all have it, and they can tell you what to do, or you can check with your agent. Agents know how to give you good recommendations on this. Okay. Select crops and spacing from planting, guys. This is essential. When you decide you want to do veggies, get one of these Bibles, or go online to Ag Horticulture and look up the plant that you're interested in. And you will have a summary of, you might want to look at sweet pepper. There's sweet pepper. And then here's in there. This is kind of your Wikipedia guide to your plant in there. Read about it. What is the plant like? When do you plant it? How far one to the other? How do they like water? This is your culture guide for your plant. Don't do anything in terms of planting until you've read it and you understand something about your plant. And if you don't understand it, talk to somebody who does, and talk to a couple of people. You've got some people who will always tell you one thing. You need to talk to a couple of people on planting. But that's a wonderful source. Buy varieties that grow from a local nursery. These people around here know the stuff. You know what to get. Fertilize according to need. Now, on the fertilizer, once is not enough. You'll learn as you read in there that some of these plants, some of these veggies are what's known as heavy feeders. And that means you've got to do it more than once. And then you'll hear side dress this plant. What does side dress mean? It means kind of along the side of where you're planting, put your fertilizer in there and get it on in and go heavy when you plant, and then maybe it might say a couple, 3 weeks later, go heavy again on it. This is critical. If you want robust plants, you've got to feed them. It's very important, and you must know when to do it. These guides will tell you when that is. Irrigation. I tried here to give you some guides that would be helpful. There's nothing here that's really green. You've got to work at this yourself. When you start out planting, you know that most plants will need some extra water to get in there. So the best idea is to plan on giving them water almost every day. And as Michael has said, be constant with this, be wise in how you do it. Check it out, and watch the plants. They will tell you with their leaves whether they're winning or losing. If they start curling and down, you know you need to add some. Don't do it at night, because what will happen is, just as Michael says, you'll encourage fungus. Do it in the morning. That's it. It's amazing when you get it early in the morning. The plants just love it. And they'll soak it on up right away, and you're good for the day. It just means you got to get out there early. Veggies need 1 inch of water a week from rain or irrigation. During dry periods, a little bit more. That's 30 to 60 gallons per 4x8 bed. So it's not a small amount of water. And the desirable thing is to get it to go in and soak on down. Remember, Michael was telling you the soils are different. Some of those soils, if you had sand, for example, would go right through right away. Clay, it'd hang around for a long time. Neither one alone is good. You need a blend. That's why compost is very helpful. It gives more of a robustness to the soil. Use your finger. Calibrate your finger. Learn when it's damp, when it's too dry. Accept the fact you're going to make some wrong decisions. It just happens on that. But over time, you're accumulating knowledge. You become sage over time. You figure out how to do this. Watering can is a pretty good way to go. I like it, quite frankly. You save yourself from overwatering. It just means you've got to fill it all the time. It's a problem. Early in the morning, mulch is critical. On there, I probably don't even have enough mulch on there. Remember when I grabbed my hand and I pulled it up like this out on there? That was mulch that I was grabbing. You cannot garden without mulch. In fact, there are 2 things that are magic bullets here that I want you to take back. It's compost, be very heavy in amending your soil. It's mulch, put it on top to prevent it from evaporating. Use the plant guides, use Aggie Horticulture, get used to this website, and it's very helpful. Weed and pest management. Whole wheat. If you stay with it, you won't ever have to use Roundup. And you probably don't want to use Roundup. It's necessary, but if you can keep it out of the garden, you're probably better off. Keep the garden clean. You noticed today you didn't see too much around there. Keep walking around and cleaning it up. Look for pests daily. Take them off. Those stink bugs, you can see them, they're slow. You can grab them. And they're goners, just like that. The worms, not good things. You can grab those guys too and knock them out. Look for pests underneath the leaves. and take them off if you can. There's something called neem oil, which is a spray that you can get that's pretty benign. There's another pesticide called BT that's pretty good. You will learn that there's a relatively few pests and there are relatively few good pesticides that you can use. You'll learn them about them, and you will learn how to use them. It just takes a little while. There's 1,000 out there. The choices are rich and varied. There are 1,000 cars out there, but everybody drives Chevy or Ford. You learn how to do that, and it just takes staying in the mix for a while to learn about it. The My Insects Guide, this is a real easy one. It's a nice little algorithm to go on through. Look at the end, it doesn't look like this, but I thought Michael's presentation was terrific. It really tells you who these guys are. And remember what Michael said, don't do anything until you know what you're dealing with out there. There aren't a lot of them, and they're seasonal. For example, he mentioned grasshoppers. I was told this spring by the gal up in Victoria, she said, you're going to have trouble with grasshoppers. And I've got this stuff you can put down that'll, it's hormonal and it'll stop the breeding. She knew, and it works. You'll pick up this knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge around. Okay. Fall vegetable gardening is a good time. It's warm days and cool nights. It's just tough in the summertime. It's so hot. We had some things going really well out here. We went off on vacation, and we had someone filling in, and that someone maybe 60% right. But we lost some things as a result of it. You don't worry too much about that in the fall. It's more reasonable in time, and there are plants like the ones that we're going to grow here that grow pretty quickly in the fall. It's a good time to garden. Garden in full use, you're winding down. You can see that we've still got eggplant out there and okra and bell peppers. The summer stuff is still going. We can have the fall stuff and make it happen. Again, everything cues off the frost date. Now, people laugh at it because maybe there isn't a frost, and maybe there isn't. That's for sure. But the way you decide what you can grow is the frost date. Now, these are your plant guides right here. There's fall and there's spring, and they're all worked off of the frost date. Now, this happens to come. I think this one comes from Victoria. I think this is the one for, but it's pretty close. It's really quite close to what we have. Some things you just can't grow in the fall, but a lot of things that you can. Plant guides, right? Okay. Full season crops, and here they are, right here. And some of them you can go right up to frost, and even with frost, and pull them out. And that's good because it's a nice time to work in the garden. It's brisk. We went to vacation up in Petoskey, Michigan this summer. It's way up in the northern part of Michigan, right up about Sault Ste. Marie, where Lake Superior and Lake Michigan come together up there. It gets cold really fast up there, and I put the weather website on my phone, and I looked the other day and it said snow. I said, oh my God, I can't be true. And I sent a note to a friend of mine up there, and he says, you're trying to jinx us. He said it was only 40 degrees. I said, we like 40 degrees. We could enjoy 40 degrees down here, but it's nice to garden in the wintertime. The garden has a cycle. It comes to an end around Christmas thereafter. What you do is you clean them out. I've already cleaned out some of it. You throw it into the compost heap. You dress the beds with mulch and compost. fill the leaf bins, and plan your spring garden. This is the downtime. This is when you work and do one of these kind of things. You talk with others and get ready for spring. I've just done it a little early because I had this opportunity. Michael and I included our contact information so you can use us as resources. That's the presentation. Questions?